April 14th, 1865. The day of America's greatest triumph and its most terrifying tragedy. Everyone knows that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater that fateful evening. But few know about the chilling events that preceded that deadly shot. What if I told you that Lincoln foresaw his own death in a horrifyingly realistic nightmare? Or that on the morning of his murder, he created a secret service that could have saved him? The end of the Civil War hides dark secrets they don't write about in school textbooks. Secret orders, Confederate spies, and mystical coincidences that simply cannot be explained by ordinary logic. Why did his main bodyguard leave his post that night for a glass of whiskey? How did one of the president's last decrees forever change the course of world forensic history? Today, we will reveal absolutely unknown facts about the final days of the 16th U.S. president. This is not a story about high politics. This is a story about a man walking towards death. Watch this video to the end to discover a secret that has been hidden for decades. April 18th, 1865. The United States of America is bleeding out. After 4 years of horrific slaughter, the Civil War has claimed the lives of over 600,000 Americans on both sides of the conflict. Abraham Lincoln, incredibly exhausted and having aged 10 years, carries this burden alone. Look at his photographs from that time. Deep wrinkles, sunken eyes, absolute physical exhaustion. Finally, a breakthrough happens. The Confederate capital, the city of Richmond, falls under the onslaught of the Northern Army. Lincoln decides to personally visit the captured city, risking his own life for a symbolic gesture. The president walks through the smoking ruins of Richmond without an army, only accompanied by a handful of sailors. Freed black slaves fall to their knees before him with tears in their eyes. "Stand up," he tells them. "You must kneel only to the Almighty." At this moment, General Robert E. Lee, commander of the South, realizes the war is definitively lost. On April 9th, Lee signs the surrender at the Appomattox courthouse. The war is over. Washington erupts in jubilation. People flood the streets, singing songs and lighting bonfires. It seems the long-awaited peace has arrived, and the president can finally breathe easy. But Lincoln does not share the general euphoria. He is tormented by heavy premonitions and severe depression. His wife, Mary Todd, notices that her husband has become withdrawn and falls silent too often. He knew for a fact that fanatics remained in the South who refused to accept defeat. Among them was a famous theater actor, John Wilkes Booth, a staunch supporter of slavery. Booth had already been developing a plan to kidnap the president, but the South's surrender drastically changed his intentions. Now he desired only one thing: cruel and bloody revenge for the destroyed Confederacy. In those days, Lincoln receives hundreds of death threat letters, but stubbornly ignores them. He puts these letters into a special envelope in his desk labeled assassination. 3 days before his death, Lincoln has that famous and terrifying dream. He wanders the empty corridors of the White House and hears the loud weeping of invisible people. Going down to the East Room, he sees a catafalque draped in the national flag and an honor card. "Who is dead in the White House?" asks Lincoln to a soldier standing nearby. "The president," replies the sentry. "He was killed by a ruthless assassin." Lincoln wakes up in a cold sweat. This nightmare will haunt him to the very end. The morning of April 14th, a day that will forever change the history of the United States. Oddly enough, this morning, Lincoln is in a wonderful mood. He feels incredible relief because the terrible fratricidal war is finally left behind. On this day, he signs one seemingly completely routine document, a decree on the creation of the United States Secret Service. Yes, that very legendary agency. It sounds like incredibly cruel irony of fate, doesn't it? The organization that today protects presidents was created by Lincoln on the day of his death. But in 1865, it had a completely different task. The Secret Service was supposed to fight counterfeiters who flooded the country with fake dollars. No one even thought about the president's personal security back then. It was considered an excess. Lincoln often walked around Washington alone, sincerely believing that the people loved him. In the afternoon, Abraham and Mary go for a romantic ride in an open carriage. The president dreams of the future. He tells his wife that he wants to see Jerusalem. "I have never felt so happy," he confesses to her. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the clock has already started its deadly countdown. John Wilkes Booth enters Ford's Theater to pick up his morning mail. There, he accidentally finds out that the president himself will attend the play tonight. For the fanatical Booth, this was a sign from above, the perfect chance for bloody retribution. He immediately gathers his accomplices in a dark room of a cheap Washington boarding house. Booth's plan was monstrous in its scale. He wanted to destroy the entire government, a simultaneous strike. They were to kill Lincoln, the vice president, and the Secretary of State. This attack was supposed to decapitate the North and give the South a chance to rise again. Evening falls. The weather deteriorates. A cold and thick fog descends on Washington. Lincoln feels a strange fatigue. He doesn't even want to go to this theater. The play Our American Cousin seems to him a silly and completely uninteresting comedy. He tries to cancel the visit, but the press has already announced the president's presence. Lincoln does not want to disappoint the public. He sighs heavily and puts on his famous top hat. As a bodyguard, he is assigned a police officer named John Parker. This was the worst possible choice. Parker had a terrible reputation. He had been fined many times for drunkenness, sleeping on duty, and visiting brothels. And this exact man was supposed to protect the life of the president on the most dangerous night. Lincoln's carriage arrives at Ford's Theater. A crowd has already gathered at the entrance. The president takes a step into the darkness towards the man who was already gripping a pistol in his pocket. The play has already begun. Lincoln and his wife quietly enter their government box. The actors pause their performance. The orchestra begins to play Hail to the Chief. The hall erupts in applause. Lincoln bows to the public with a smile, sits down in his rocking chair, and takes his wife's hand. Police officer John Parker is supposed to sit right at the door of the box in the hallway. But from that spot, he cannot see the stage at all, and this annoys him. After a while, Parker becomes unbearably bored. He makes a fatal decision. He simply gets up and leaves, leaving the President of the United States absolutely defenseless. Where did he go? To the neighboring bar, the Star Saloon, to drink whiskey. And by a cruel irony of fate, it was in this exact bar that John Wilkes Booth was sitting. The assassin and the bodyguard were drinking alcohol in the same room, just a few meters apart. Booth finishes his brandy, checks his Derringer revolver, and steps out into the night fog. He enters the theater. As a famous actor, he moves freely without raising any suspicion. Booth knew the play Our American Cousin simply by heart. Every line, every pause. He is waiting for one specific moment. Act 3, Scene 2. The moment when the actor on stage will deliver that very line. "You sockdologizing old man trap." The hall erupts in deafening laughter. Booth takes a step forward and raises his hand with the revolver. He aims right at Lincoln's head. The distance is less than half a meter. Flash! A deafening roar that mixes with the laughter of hundreds of people. A .44 caliber lead bullet pierces the president's skull. Lincoln instantly loses consciousness. His head falls onto his chest. Mary Todd doesn't understand what has happened for a second. And then the theater is torn apart by her piercing, heartbreaking scream. Officer Henry Rathbone, sitting nearby, lunges at the assassin, but Booth pulls out a hunting knife and inflicts a deep bloody wound to Rathbone's shoulder. Climbing onto the railing of the box, Booth prepares to jump to the stage, a drop of nearly 12 feet. He jumps, but his spur catches on the American flag decorating the box. Booth crashes onto the stage, breaking his left leg. The audience thinks it's part of the show. He struggles to his feet, raises his bloody knife, and shouts in Latin, "Thus always to tyrants," after which, limping, he disappears into the darkness backstage. In the theater, absolute panic begins. Doctors push their way to the box through the screaming crowd. Lincoln's wound is fatal. The lead bullet is lodged too deeply, right behind his right eye. The president is carefully carried to the boarding house across the street. The bed turns out to be too short for his height. The next morning, on April 15th, under a pouring rain, Abraham Lincoln's heart stops beating. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, wiping away tears, quietly says, "Now he belongs to the ages." But what about the guard, John Parker, who abandoned his post for a drink? Amazingly, he faced no punishment whatsoever. He simply returned to duty. Booth hid for 12 days until he was cornered in a tobacco barn in Virginia. The barn was set on fire. The assassin was shot through a crack in the wall as he tried to escape. The Secret Service, created by Lincoln on the day of his death, began protecting presidents only decades later. This tragedy forever changed America, showing the whole world just how vulnerable power can be. Lincoln saved his nation from falling apart, but he couldn't save himself. History hides many more secrets. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new investigations. Hit the like button and tell us in the comments whose history shocks you the most.